Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Sage Live of September 2022. Before we start, let me briefly explain what Sage Journey is and how Sage Live fits into that journey. Sage Journey is a program whose mission is to inspire and encourage students to explore STEM careers for their future. And we do this by offering free summer camps, paid internships, professional growth sessions, and many opportunities to connect with professionals who care about you and your future. So Sage Live is one of these opportunities, and it's part of the Sage Journey. We gather online, and if you're curious about the next step in your Sage Journey, here you can find some of the answers. So Sage Live is the time to reconnect with the Sage volunteers, and we have it monthly via Zoom. And we cover topics that are relevant to your journey, career related, like designing your life, writing a resume, how to prepare for an interview, or exciting topics like quantum computing, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on. So the topic of today is about college planning and college application. So let's start with our first speaker. Most of you know her. And she will also be the moderator for our panel. So our first speaker is Dream Lopez, who attended Sage Camp in 2018 and while she was at Alhambra High School in Martinez, California. She is currently a student at UC Berkeley, and she intends to earn a double major in data science and public health in 2025. As you know, we always tell a little bit about our speaker and what they do in their free time. Dream in her free time likes to read, crochet, and hang out with her friends. So today, Dream will share with us her experience with college application. And here you go. Welcome, Dream.
Hello, everyone. Quickly before I start, I do want to apologize for any background noise. It's game day, so a lot's going on. So I guess to get started, in order to kind of talk about my college application experience, definitely need to know some background about me. So I went to a smallish high school. I think I graduated with only 260 people. So yeah, it was everyone knew everyone. And I'm also a first gen college student. And I know a lot of people may not know what that is. But basically, I'm the first person in my family to attend a 4-year college. Because of that, it was really hard for me to get started with the college application process. I didn't know how to start or when to start. I was very much just like pushed into the void, not really sure like where to go. But I am attending one of my dream schools and I absolutely love it. So I had to do something. A friend introduced me to a private college counselor that really, really helped me. She guided me through every single step through the application process, but that is not necessary at all. I know a lot of high schools offer career centers or college counseling. So I really recommend that you reach out to your school counselors, even a teacher that you think could help you with the process if you're having a difficult time. Or even me, like I'd love to help people out. Feel free to shoot me an email. So I ended up starting my applications in, I believe, either late July or early August. So kind of early. And I applied to 15 schools, which is very excessive. And I realized, I knew that at the time, and I know that now. But I was really, really worried about not getting into a school because of my major. I applied under computer science everywhere, which is super impacted. And so I guess if you're anxious about maybe applying under an impacted major, apply to more schools, maybe. So I applied test blind to all schools because frankly, my SAT scores were not the best reflection of me. But that is like definitely a personal choice. I know a lot of schools still offer test blind. So it's just your preference now, I think. And my essays included topics ranging from how I like to bake, to making my bed every morning, to my experience with my sister's stroke. So when you're writing your essays, you can really talk about anything. You really just want to showcase, something unique about yourself. A question I get a lot is what schools I applied to, because I applied to 15 of them. So really quickly, I applied to UC Berkeley, UC Santa Barbara, UC Santa Cruz, UC Davis, UCLA, San Diego State, Chico State, Long Beach State, SF State, Yale, Stanford, St. Mary's, NYU, Oregon State, and University of Hawaii. And so when I was kind of building my list, I wanted to have a good amount of safety, target, and reach schools. And for those of you that maybe don't know, safety schools are typically schools that have high acceptance rates and your stats are well above their average. Whereas like a target school might have a lower acceptance rate and their stats are pretty much in line with yours. And then a reach school is those schools that are really difficult to get into. Maybe your stats align with them or they don't, and their acceptance rate's really low. I kind of like to think of those as like the private schools and the Ivies, all of that. So I was lucky enough to get into or waitlisted from almost every school I applied to. I think I only got 1 or 2 rejections, but I did end up deciding on Berkeley for a number of reasons. It was my dream school. It was close to home. It was really good for my major. And I absolutely love the city of Berkeley. And so I knew I would really enjoy not only my education, but also the social life here, which is something that I think you should really take into consideration when applying to a school. You might not want to live in the middle of nowhere, and that's okay. Or maybe you do want to live in the middle of nowhere. Let's see. So my next little section here to talk about is kind of like my process after my applications. I feel like it definitely doesn't get talked about enough. Even though I did get into my dream school, my rejections and my waitlist offers were still heartbreaking. It is so, so difficult to pour all of this time and energy and like your hopes into an application just for you to not be liked. And so it is very difficult, but I truly believe that you end up at a school that works best for you and that everything works out in the end. Moving on. So some tips and advice that I maybe have before we get started with our panel is that once you get into college and you move into your dorm, things can still be really, really difficult. It's like you have the application process that's really difficult. The end of your senior year is super difficult. And then you're just pushed into college in this new environment. And it can be really scary and hard. But ask for help. Everyone in college wants to see you succeed. Your professors, your RAs, your GSIs, all of that, they all want you to do amazing. And if you don't ask for help, they can't help you. So ask for help. Also, a thing about college applications that I think is really important to note is that a lot of schools offer fee waiver codes. And that's something that I used because I did apply to 15 schools and I couldn't exactly afford all of my application fees. So I ended up actually reaching out to some admission counselors and, asking them some questions about the school and asking if they had a waiver code. And a lot of times they did, and they were able to send that to me. So if that's maybe something you're worried about, I really recommend reaching out. And once again, asking for that help and that assistance. I also highly suggest something that really helped me was going to info sessions for schools. You know, how did I choose the 15 schools that I did? I went to so many different info sessions for schools that I did end up applying to and ones that I didn't, because I didn't really like the way their curriculum was set up, or I didn't really like how they formatted this or this. So I really suggest going to your info sessions and asking questions and seeing, do you think you would be a good fit here? Because it's not worth the time and energy to apply to a school that you don't think you would enjoy, no matter how prestigious that school may be. I also think that that was a really great thing that helped me, because you get to meet admission counselors, you get to like have them put a face to the name, that kind of thing. Next, some questions that I was asked to maybe speak on was what I recommend high schoolers now do. I saw from the poll that a lot of you guys are seniors, but there's also a lot of sophomores and juniors. So I guess for seniors, your application season has already started. And if you haven't started, that's okay. You can still do it. I believe in you. So for seniors, I really recommend, you know, asking for help, reaching out, have people edit your essays, edit your friends' essays, and kind of think about what you want to showcase about yourself in those essays. You have so many different things about you, and you really want them to get a full picture of who you are and what you're going to contribute to the school and what you want to accomplish in the future. And then to sophomores, juniors, maybe even freshmen, join clubs. Clubs helped me so much. Not only like with my application process, it gave me something to talk about, but it also really helped me explore my passions and what I want to do in the future. I'm also convinced though that like admission counselors know when you do something just because you want to get into a good college. So don't go joining a bunch of clubs just because they look cool or they're like prestigious. Join clubs that like actually truly interest you. It's no fun pouring hours of your time into something you don't enjoy. It's also a really great opportunity to search for your interests and your passions and all of that. You know, when you pick a major, you're applying to colleges, you need something fun to talk about. So you should find that something fun that interests you. Another question that I get asked a lot is what I would do differently. I wouldn't do anything differently. And I feel like that's maybe a little weird. Like, obviously, I didn't take the easiest path, and I'm sure it wasn't the best path to get where I am, but I don't really regret any of the things that I did. I don't regret the clubs that I joined, the jobs I had, the classes I took, my essay topics, even the number of schools I applied to. If I was going to apply to schools again, I'd probably still apply to the same 15, because you never know. Maybe I wouldn't have gotten into all of them this round of applications. And although the process is really difficult, I know that like I put my best foot forward and I really tried my hardest. And so you just want to be able to tell yourself that, you know, it's not a good feeling to start and submit a college application the day before it's due, because then you're going to be sitting at the computer opening your response and you might be really scared because you know you could have done better. So I really recommend just starting early, asking for help, to really help you ease that anxiety, and like then it's not as difficult or as scary of a process. So to kind of conclude, I guess my little talk is that just need to try your hardest, whether you're starting your applications now or you're still in high school, you're like a sophomore, not even thinking about applications. Just go throughout your education, doing your very best, and asking for advice and help from other people, because you're not alone. And we're also all here to support you. So yeah, I think that's everything that I had to say. I'm not sure if I should answer any questions you guys have about my experience. If you don't have any questions, then I think we can move on to the panel.
I'm certain that there will be questions.
Okay. Yeah.
Let me, in the meantime, introduce our two panelists. Our first panelist is Sylvia Leong. Sylvia graduated from UC Berkeley with a degree in communication. She has worked in education for over 20 years. She has been an admissions director at both USC Business School and Carnegie Mellon Engineering School, and has been a freshman reader at UC Berkeley. She has read thousands of applications in that time and has a passion for helping students tell their unique story. Our second panelist is Joshua Reiseneck. Joshua is an admissions advisor at New Mexico State University. He helps students harness their curiosity, so their potential, and so to harness their curiosity, to see their potential and achieve their goals. Josh attended the University of New Mexico, where he earned a dual degree in psychology and liberal arts. After completing his undergraduate studies, he moved to Los Angeles to teach high school English with Teach for America and to pursue a master's degree in urban education at Loyola Marymount University. In his master thesis, Josh investigated his students' perception of college-going culture, expectation of college, and formation of college-going identities. In and out of the classroom, Josh shares education as an opportunity to explore, overcome, and grow. So welcome, Josh and Sylvia, and I give the microphone to our moderator, Dream. She gave a great talk, and now she's gonna interview our panelists.
Yes. Okay, I guess so. To get started, how we're going to be formatting this is we're going to be talking about academics, extracurriculars, resources, and applications. At the end of each section, we'll answer some questions pertaining to that topic. But if you maybe have questions about something else that we're not talking about at the moment, feel free to drop it in the chat and we'll get to that question later on. So I guess to get started, what can you guys tell us? I'm so sorry. What can you guys tell us about academics?
I can go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. It's really great to be with you all today. And Dream, thank you so much for sharing. It's really great to hear your story, and so many of the things that you advised was really just spot on. So in terms of academics, and I think Josh can back me up on this one, I think academics is going to be the #1 most important thing when it comes to your college applications. And so that's going to be everything from your transcript, what you actually took, like the courses that you're taking, as well as the grades that you're getting, and the GPA that you're getting. So some of the things that you probably want to think about, depending on what kind of school you want to go to, depending what kind of major you want to focus on, you're going to, college admissions officers are going to look for the choices that you're taking. Like if your school offers honors classes in, let's say, a science class, and you're planning on going into science, then they would like to see that you're taking advantage of those opportunities. Same thing if you're, planning on being an English major, and if there's AP English or other humanities types classes, they want to see that if those high schools that you're attending have those classes, then you should be taking those classes.
Yeah, and I think Sylvia brought up a lot of great points. And yes, I would agree that academics are going to be like the #1 consideration when it comes to the whole college application and admissions process. And yeah, there are many things to consider, including, not only the grades that you get, the GPA that you have. And I know that we have representation from high school students of like many different at many different stages of the process. So even from early on, it may seem like a lot when you're a freshman in high school or even a sophomore, that your grades from that time and the classes that you take are going to be considered when you do apply for colleges. It's not just your junior year, it's all of your high school experience. And that's not necessarily to put any undue pressure or stress on you, but it is something that you do want to consider when you're planning about, maybe you have some choices about the classes that you get to take at your high school. And it is, a good opportunity to, if your school has maybe an AP program, then like maybe don't overwhelm yourself. I wouldn't say how much you can handle as an individual. But like Sylvia said, if you are already feeling like you want to go in one direction for college, like you're enjoying, you're here at Sage, so maybe you enjoy science and STEM, then maybe you do take that AP Bio course. And a lot of the time, not only can that help you with the college admissions process, like that class is going to be, admissions counselors are going to pay attention that you took the higher level biology course, but you might also have opportunities to earn college credit if you do get, depending on the state, depending on the school, the scores that you can get on those AP exams, and perhaps save you some time and money. But those are just, some of the things that you can consider. I'm not sure if Sylvia has any thoughts on maybe dual credit or anything that I was already talking about.
I think one other thing I would mention is most of the colleges, especially the ones in probably your top first and second tier, are going to do something called holistic admissions. And what that means is they evaluate you within the context of your situation. And so let's say, your high school offers 20 different AP classes, and another high school in a different city only offers, 6 AP classes. Your application will be sent to the university, but your high school, when they send those transcripts, almost always have some sort of cover page that goes on top of your transcript. And you'll never see that cover page as a student, but the admissions folks will see the cover page. And that cover page will usually have something like, we offer this number of AP classes and this student took, this number of AP classes out of that number. Or if your high school does rankings, not all high schools do that, but if your high school does ranking, your rank number will be on that cover page. Or, if your high school doesn't do weighted GPA, it'll also say that. So it'll give you all of that information so that when the admissions officer is evaluating that transcript and your grades, they'll understand what's going on. Because I know sometimes you get a lot of those questions like, well, my school didn't offer physics, this kind of physics and that kind of physics, am I going to be disadvantaged? And the answer is no, because the admissions folks know that.
Yeah, I think that's always a good point, is that I don't want students ever to feel limited based on that their school may not have provided those opportunities. And yeah, most schools, or most universities who are going through that extra level of review, and they can take a look at maybe how you compare to other students at your school, but then also just simply Even like the context of your school. Is it an urban school? Is it a rural school? And just what types of opportunities were you presented with that you did take advantage of? And that, those are other factors that will go into those decisions as well.
And I think the other thing Josh had mentioned, AP coursework and getting the credits in college. The other thing that we might want to talk about is test scores, SAT, ACT, in addition to the AP tests and subject tests. So with most, so for depending on where you're going, I know a large majority of you are here in California, which is where I am too. UCs are doing test blind right now. I believe they've promised it through 2024, and I'm not sure if they're going to make it permanent or not. And so that's something to think about. With other private schools, most of them are test optional. And so I would say from what I've heard from different universities and different admissions places, it varies in terms of the number of students that are turning in their test scores. Probably at the top tier, if you're talking like the top 25 schools, maybe 25% of those kids are turning in their test scores. And so what that means is that they're getting very, very high test scores because probably the majority of students are not turning their test scores in. I think when you go into more of a, still top tier, but maybe not in that super top lottery school section, then it's closer to maybe 50% of the students are turning in. And Josh, probably you can talk a little bit about what you know with New Mexico.
Yeah, so New Mexico schools are kind of special. I know that a lot of students are in California. I think I got a glimpse of the poll. It looked like almost 80% of the students here are in California. And New Mexico, given that we only have two large comprehensive research universities, and we'll talk about the different types of universities later. It's not nearly as competitive in New Mexico. So a lot of the time, schools might also be using those test scores. And we're not only going to be talking about admissions, about getting admitted to the school, accepted to, so that you have an option, and then you'll get a financial aid package from that school if you're admitted to that school. But test scores can be used also. Even schools that are test optional or test blind for admissions, they may use your SAT or ACT score to help you qualify for scholarships, or they might use that for scholarship consideration. I know that not only in New Mexico, but I know a big popular school for California students, and especially if y'all have STEM interests, ASU, right? Big public university, they have a whole scholarship calculator where you input your GPA, your test scores, as well as your class rank. And all of those are factors that will not only influence admission, but then also they prepare scholarships that are based on those different academic factors.
And I see that we've got a lot of questions in the chat. So I don't know, Dream, do you want to moderate that, or how do you want to?
Yeah, definitely. We can get started. I guess our first question would be, you're saying test blind. Do you maybe want to explain what that means?
Sure. Yeah. Sorry about that. So test blind basically means that there's not even a blank in the application where you can put in your test scores. So for UCs, there's not even a place to do it. Whereas test optional, there's a place to do it in the application, and it's up to you whether or not you want to put it in.
Awesome. And so we're getting some questions regarding like courses. What if they don't know what they want to do yet? One person said they were a senior and they don't really know how they can like showcase, their interests in like the short amount of time they have left. What should they be focusing on?
So the question was, I'm sorry, like I was doing the wrong thing by reading the chat at the
no,
same
you're
time when you were talking. But a student who is a senior, what would we recommend that they do at this point? Was that
Yeah, if they don't really know what they want to do in their future, and they're a senior, what would you recommend for them?
so? If we're still talking, I guess in the academic realm, it's okay if you don't know, like if you're not like Dream and you don't know that you were going to apply to computer science at at a bunch of different at 15 different schools, then there are times when that can be even to your benefit to be a little bit more exploratory, because if you're not really set on a specific area, then you may not necessarily have to be applying to a school for that specific major, which might be impacted, which might make it more difficult to get into that school. So if you're a little bit more open, then there might be other things that you're considering in your college search. And I guess I'm stepping out of academics a little bit, but that's when there's many different aspects of a university that you can look at that are it's going to determine whether it's going to be a good fit for you or not. The size of the university, the location of the university, the student body, who goes there, what are their interests, what are they doing, what are the different. If you are an exploratory student, maybe you have an area that interests you more than another, like that, like I see in the chat just now, I see something about passionately disliking math. Then there's going to be, you can have the opportunity to research different schools that are offering maybe better arts programs or humanities or something like that. And maybe Sylvia can talk a little bit about more what she would say, what you'd recommend to a senior to do.
I would agree with you. I think at this, at this point, you're 16, 17 years old. You don't need to have that pressure to know exactly what you want to do with the rest of your life. And that's okay. There's lots of people that apply undeclared. I think with that, especially when it comes to transcript, I don't think that matters as much. I think what admissions officers are looking for is that you're choosing rigor when there is rigor available, regardless of what that is. And then the other thing that they're looking for is a love of learning. And so the courses that you're taking, are they, academically strong courses, or are you taking all, elective courses or things that aren't as challenging? And so, and we can talk more about how to display some of these other things outside academics, if you're undeclared, as we talk about like extracurriculars and things like that.
That was great. Thank you so much. On the topic of disliking math, I'm a data science major and I hate math, so you can still do it. I don't think it's an end all be all. Next question we have is, does taking community college courses in addition to our school coursework make a difference in our application?
I saw Sylvia taking a drink, so I can respond first. And what I would say is in my work as an admissions advisor, I actually, visit a lot of like rural schools that may not necessarily have the opportunity students at those schools may not have the opportunity to take AP courses because they may not even have the teaching staff to provide, just a general, like overall comprehensive curriculum. And a lot of the time, those schools will have partnerships with local community colleges or regional universities where students can enroll in dual credit classes. And I don't necessarily think that I wouldn't say that every student should do dual credit. But I would say that it is potentially a good opportunity for you to do some of that exploration, as well as, so there might be a dual credit class that you can take, through your school and then a local college, that maybe it's a special topic that's of interest to you, and that's something that you couldn't do in your high school. That's one way to integrate something different into your transcripts and on your application. And then also just generally, it can be for some students, getting exposed to some semblance of a college environment is good, because it is different. And I'm sure Dream can attest to going to UC Berkeley now, and a much different school than, did you say 260 students at your high school? So there's always like it's just I'd say an opportunity to get exposed to a different type of education as well. And I'm not sure if Sylvia has any other thoughts about that.
No, that was good. I think we can probably do another question. I think there's a lot of questions.
I know, yeah. Let's see. So another question we have is for our AP scores. Do some universities require that you submit all of the scores? Because some of my scores I'm not so proud of, and I wouldn't want that to weigh on my disadvantage.
So the answer to that is it depends. So if you are looking at STEM, and I know a lot of the attendees here are looking at STEM, or at least interested in it, then if you're taking an AP class in physics or math, or AP Java, or some of these things that are more engineering related or STEM related, then it's helpful for them to see that you've taken the test, and it's nice to see that that you do well on it. But at the same time, it's not specifically required. So at the end of the day, you getting like a 5 or a 4 on the AP test really has more to do with whether or not you get credit for it for your college graduation. Oftentimes they'll say, oh, good, you took AP Calculus BC, great. You get general ed credits for that once you get into our college. You don't necessarily get to waive out of math class, those kinds of things. So when it comes to the test versus the course is more important than the test, if that makes sense. So they're going to be looking more closely at the course that you took and the grade that you got into it versus the test itself.
That was great. Do you have anything to add, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I would just second that. Yeah, that a lot of the times we'll answer a lot of these questions that like it depends, just because there are so many different universities, and the way that they handle the submission of test scores and everything like that is different. But almost always, yeah, the fact that you took the course is like more important than the score that you got on the exam, at least for AP classes, I would say.
Yeah, awesome. And I think we'll do one more question regarding academics, and then we can come back to these later on if we have time. So our last question will be, how is a gap year seen / evaluated on their application?
The answer is it depends. So I guess the question would be, why is the student choosing to do the gap year? What are they doing during that time with the gap year? Over the pandemic, there were quite a few students that did some sort of gap year or some sort of deferral because they didn't want to pay thousands of dollars to attend school online, and so they decided to wait a year, or because there were just things going on at home with COVID. And so I think that colleges are probably more accustomed to it now because of what they went through with the pandemic, and it has actually impacted a lot of freshman admissions the last year, This past year, I think actually there was a lot of impact on admissions. I don't know at this point. I think most colleges are going to expect to go back to quote unquote normal a little bit and not necessarily be as flexible or open with the gap year or deferrals. And again, it still depends, you know, on what it is that you're doing with that time.
Yeah, and I guess to elaborate that on a little bit more is, if you're considering that as an option, definitely have a plan. And because it could potentially have an effect on your like admissions or application, or even just the trajectory of your life. Because you know, research does consistently show that students are more likely to graduate in 4 years if they don't take a gap year, if they continue their education from high school. And then, but the students who, you know, are successful, who do take gap years, it's usually those who there is a purpose to taking that year. And definitely, whether you're engaging in like a special program, or if you're maybe going on a mission, or you know, something like that, and not necessarily just taking a break and then, you know, trying to come back later. Although there's not, you know, there are, you know, reasons why we might need breaks from time to time. And like Sylvia said, I think during COVID, it was definitely more like, you know, yeah, college were more permissive about that. Colleges were more permissive. But I think, you know, heading forward, it's probably going to tend more toward like, if you're going to take that time, then make use of it. It should be valuable, and yeah, use the gap year wisely. I like that from Anna.
Awesome. That was great. Thank you. So we will be moving into our next section. Would you guys like to discuss anything regarding extracurriculars?
Sure. So extracurriculars are, again, we go back to holistic education, right? Or holistic admissions. And so overall, when the admissions officer is looking at your whole application, they're looking at your scores, looking at the courses that you took, they're looking at what you did with the time outside of school, and that's going to be your extracurriculars. And there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about extracurriculars. I think somebody said, I can't remember if it was you, Dream, or somebody in the chat, talked about whether or not to do like a ton of extracurriculars, or to do things that you don't actually like because you think it looks good on college applications. And oh yeah, it was you, Dream, that, you know, talked about just really trying to do what you're passionate about. And it is true. Like, we want to see, as admissions officers, when we're reading your story, we want to see that passion. We want to see that intellectual curiosity that comes across in what you're choosing to do with the time outside of school. Sometimes that's sports, sometimes that's club, sometimes that's working part-time, sometimes it's taking care of family, and they all are equally valuable. There's nothing that's weighted more than the other. It's more about what you're doing or how much you're investing and growing in whatever it is that you're choosing to do.
Yeah, and I'll second that. And I think do what matters to you, or that you will, like, yeah, you are developing, you are growing, because not only will that be reflected on, I think that it's easier to tell when a student has selected to do, just check all the boxes, sign up for everything. And then a lot of the time, you know, how that is reflected elsewhere in the application, it's maybe in their essay, they don't have a really clear idea about, you know, what they gained from those experiences. So I would say that through extracurriculars is another means that you can develop the rest of your application too, because a lot of the time students write about a transformative experience that they had when they participated in like whatever club or sports, and it's usually, you know, through those other avenues that you're able to yeah, just develop as a person, and also figure out what you're passionate about, and just do some personal growth and learning that is just going to be of benefit to you. It's not necessarily whether you did things or whether you did the right things. It's more so that what you did, was that right for you, and did you learn from it? Because and then a lot of the time, like Sylvia said too, a lot of us don't necessarily have all the time in the world, or we might have other commitments and responsibilities in our home. But it's important for you to also understand that for yourself too. Not necessarily as like an excuse, but also like being able to reflect on those experiences as well.
And I see there's a question about, will focusing on just one extracurricular look bad on the application? And I would say absolutely not. You know, if you have one thing that you're super focused on, or something that takes up a lot of time, I'm thinking about, you know, sometimes robotics clubs takes forever because it's year round, or FBLA or DECA or Key Club, or all of these things that require a lot of commitment. And that's great, that's fine. Again, it's about what you're doing with that. So if you're going to, let's say, for example, be a member of FBLA, and for all 4 years, you're just kind of doing the bare minimum, and you're not able to really talk about how much this means to you, or what you've put into it, the relationships you developed, the leadership skills that you gained, the conflict resolution that you had to deal with, the competition that you had to work hard for. You know, if you're just a member and just kind of sitting there and being passive, then I would say, you know, that's probably not what admissions officers are going to want to see, because they're looking for students when they come to college that will be an active and engaging member of their community too. And it doesn't mean that you need to be super active in ASB or Spirit Rally or all that stuff in your school, but it just means that you need to show that when you're interested in something, you pursue it, and that you'll bring that with you, and you'll bring that kind of same attitude or curiosity. So.
That was great, thank you. I think we got a question asking, what is the order in which to put your extracurriculars? And I think this might be referring to like the ordering on the Common App and the UC app. There's like a certain order that you put your extracurriculars. So maybe you wanted to discuss that a bit.
So it doesn't really matter. There's 10 spots in the UC, and I think there's 10 spots in Common App as well. And they each have like a, you know, I think there's a drop down box for category, and a drop down box for like number of hours a week or something like that. So there's no magic to the order in which you put it in.
Oh, awesome. We have another question. When it comes to school clubs, I've joined a lot of different clubs: med-related, science Olympiad, community service, school newspaper, Spanish honors, society. Sorry, wait, it's like loading. And I haven't been able to narrow down things that I'm interested in. So like, what would you suggest that they do? Should they be continuing all of those things, or should they really try to like, how could they narrow it down?
And I can take this one first. And I relate to, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce the student's name, but I see the question in the chat too. But I definitely relate to that. I was that student. So I think that admissions counselors recognize that as well. That again, it goes back to what Sylvia said earlier, is that you're 16 or 17 years old, and it's completely natural to not know what you want to do exactly right now. And but it is, you know, it is clear that if you are engaging in you know, many different areas, that maybe you are on that search, or you're, are experimenting and kind of exploring different things. And but I do think that, like Sylvia said too, it's not like you have to settle on one thing and that's your thing. But wherever you find yourself, like what did you get from that experience, or if you're choosing to stay with whatever organization or something, there has to be something that you learned from that experience or that you can carry forward, or maybe after. And it's only, I mean, we're talking about college applications, but I mean also just in life in general, it's good to figure out, you based on some things that you do, it can help you realize that, hey, maybe this isn't for me, or hey, this is for me. So I don't necessarily think that it's not inherently bad to like have a bunch of things that you've done. But hopefully after trying so many things, one of those things sticks, and then you're able to talk about that more, or move, like continue in that area, whether it's academically or just personally for your own enrichment.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think it doesn't matter if you're in a bunch of things, it shows that you're exploring, and that's perfectly fine. I think I will say, and I think it kind of goes with that leadership role question. If we, as an admissions officer, just personally, if I see that you're on a lot of things, but I don't see a commitment to at least one of those things, then I think that does raise some questions for me, because then I do wonder, well, are you just on the membership roster so that you just kind of flit around from these different things, but you're not actually committed to anything? And so it doesn't mean that you need to be a leader in terms of you have to be an officer, or you have to be president or something like that. That's not required. But I think if we see a lot of these things, and admissions officers, we're familiar with these different clubs, right? We know how much time it takes to do, what Science Olympiad or community service or some of these things. We understand that these things take a lot of time. And so it does sometimes make us wonder, if we're looking at, oh, how is she doing all of these things? Well, maybe she's not that committed to any of them. And so, I would say it's important to, like Josh say, explore, but then show some passion for something in there.
That was great. Thank you. So in regards to like those clubs and being involved, we've also been getting a few questions about having a leadership role in these clubs, or like being on the board. How important is having that leadership role? And like, do you need to be on the board in order to like appeal to colleges?
I guess I can start a little bit, because of what Sylvia had said before kind of folds into this a little bit, is that having a leadership role does demonstrate that you did have a little bit more commitment, and that in one way or another, you stood out among your peers, or just that you stuck with it, maybe for more than one semester, maybe more than 1 year, like throughout high school. But I don't necessarily think that you don't have to hold a formal title or leadership role to have leadership experience as well. And there could be a student who demonstrates more passion from the same organization, who their experience might show better on their application than just a leader who puts like, I led this group. Like I mean, I'm thinking about how this shows up in like essays, but usually when you are committed enough to become a leader in an organization, then you're able to get experiences that do teach you something, or do show something about yourself, or that you can learn from how people work, or like Sylvia said earlier, conflict resolution and things like that. So it may not necessarily be the specific title that an admissions officer is looking for. It may be more holistic than that.
Just to add on to that, I totally agree with that. I think the other thing I would think about also is sometimes being that officer, that president, or whatever it is, if it's kind of a solo position, like you're not really interacting with anyone, that's not necessarily better, right? So you could just be a member of your, soccer team, but you were the one at the end of the game who stayed behind and helped, the freshmen who were struggling. But if you're a captain and really all you've done, not all you've done, but if you're captain, and it's mostly about your skills as a soccer player, which is great, but then you're not necessarily investing in other people or having some sort of human interaction. A lot of times admissions officers are looking for that kind of human interaction. How do you deal with people around you? How do you collaborate? How do you bring others up with you or along with you? How do you solve those conflicts? And I think that can play better or tell a better story about who you are and how you'll be as a student than sometimes just kind of being the top person in charge, but then doing all of your work by yourself, right? Like if the essay is mostly about, I was in charge and I stayed up till 4 a.m. doing all of this, which, is a lot of work and a lot of kids will do that. But then what that kind of says to me as an admissions officer is, well, how come you didn't reach out to other people? How come you didn't delegate, or do you not know, are you the type of person that just take everything on yourself and doesn't really share the load or know how to work with others? Those are the kinds of things that you may want to think about a little bit.
That was great. Thank you so much. I think we're going to be moving on to resources, but we can come back to the extracurricular questions if we have more time at the end. So for resources, maybe you guys want to talk about like where people are able to get some help and support. I know also a big topic is financial aid, scholarship, stuff like that.
Well, I don't want to push people toward speaking with me, but specifically, but I know that when I interact with students, so like I'm an admissions advisor, so I meet with a lot of high school students, and sometimes when I meet with students, I notice that they're a little like shy, reserved, like they maybe are like scared that I'm judging them or something like that. But a lot of the time there's an admissions office in like every university, no matter the type of university, and the staff in the admissions office, at least for the most part, philosophically, like we're on your team. Like we want to find a reason to get you into the university. So we're looking out for you, and we want to help you, and we know a whole lot about, or we know a little bit about a whole lot at our specific institution, and maybe about other colleges as well. So what I would say, we're a good resource, especially when you're looking at different schools. It's kind of can be like a fast track of like getting a cheat sheet of information from one person, because I know it is a lot of effort on your own to try to like figure out about all these different schools, especially if you're applying to like 15 different schools, or and you may not necessarily have the luxury of, maybe you go to a large school. Like I went to a large high school, and I met with my counselor like once my senior year, and you may not have access to like college counseling and stuff like that. So I would say, admissions officers generally can be a good resource, especially when you're looking at specific institutions. And sometimes even your interactions with admissions officers can be considered in your application as well.
I would also add on that each of you in your high school will have, like Josh said, some sort of guidance counselor who's assigned to you for helping to make sure you graduate. And they will usually give you some sort of advice about different schools that you can apply to. Most most high schools also have a college and career center of some kind. Not every high school will have it, but most of the high schools should have at least, if not a center, then a person. And it could be your guidance counselor, who is also that designated person who knows about different colleges. But for most high schools, the college admissions officers will send information to your school. They'll say, hey, you know, this year we're going test optional. Or, oh, did you know that we just opened up a new program in aerospace engineering? And they'll send the brochures, right? Colleges have all these brochures. You're probably, if you're a senior or junior, you're probably getting them in the mail every single day. But they also send it to the high schools. And so those brochures are going somewhere. If it's not a college and career center or a person, it'll be your guidance counselor. And so you don't have to pay for an expensive independent consultant or a consulting company. You can get a lot of free resources right in your own high school with those guidance counselors. And so we really, I always recommend that you go and talk to those folks, just like you can also talk to the admissions officers at the schools that you're interested in. And you can get a lot of free information from them.
That was great, thank you. In regards to scholarships, financial aid, I know most scholarships are like depending on the school, but maybe if you would want to kind of talk about how they can get started on that process.
So something I talk to students a lot about that sometimes is surprising, especially if you are maybe a first generation college student, might be the first in your family to go to school. And a lot of what we hear popularly is that, you know, college is very expensive and it's not affordable. And although, you know, there is some truth to that statement, and it certainly depends on where you're looking at going to school, what type of institution it is, whether you're a resident of the state where that college is. There are still but there are also, you know, resources that, you know, financial aid resources that are accessible to most students. So specifically, there's the free application for federal student aid. So if you're a senior, you probably hear a lot about FAFSA, right? Like maybe your guidance counselor, your teachers are bugging you about that already. But FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, is an option for U.S. citizens and permanent residents to receive grants, loans, grants, loans, or work study funds from the federal government to help pay for school. And that's kind of the basics. But you'll apply for FAFSA every single year that you're in college. So it's like an annual thing that you kind of have to keep up with. You have to work with your parents on it because it does consider your family income because it's needs-based. But, you know, this is especially pertinent to students who you might feel like that you're not going to be able to have that support from your family. There may be other resources available. And I'm not sure if Sylvia want to expand on that at all.
Yeah, FAFSA is super complicated and it feels scary to fill out that form. When you're at the point at which when you're applying, you just fill it out and it's mostly just asking for your parents' tax information. That's basically what it is. It's asking, you know, like how much have your parents made? What are the additional costs that they have? Do you have other siblings in college? They're trying to get a sense of how much income you have. And then based on that, they'll then come back and they'll say, okay, based on what you gave us, or based on what the information you provided, here's what we think your expected need is. And then based on that number, then you can go and get loans or you can get scholarships, and it depends on the school. So some schools will say, oh, we can meet 100% of your need. And other schools will say, okay, we can give you, you know, like 10% of that need, and the rest we expect you to go get loans for. And so the answer to it is going to depend on the school that you get into, and they'll tell you. The other thing to keep in mind is there are so many scholarships out there. And there are super random scholarships. Like it will say, and the scholarships will come from all sorts of places. It's gonna come from the big companies, like you're gonna look at like the Coca-Cola scholarship, which gives like $100,000. But then there's going to be these little scholarships in your hometown from some family who, you know, might say, you know, because our mother was a teacher who taught bilingual education, this scholarship is for any student who is also Tibetan and is looking to teach bilingual education, right? And so there's so many different scholarships out there, and you can actually go on and Google just scholarships, and there's a big database, and most of the organizations and foundations that have some sort of scholarship to offer, they usually put their things up there. And so you can narrow down, you can filter, and you can see what things can actually apply to you and then apply to them. And some of these places, they only get like 5 applicants. And so you can end up getting that scholarship pretty easily.
I'd say, yeah, definitely. There's a lot. So not only, so we're talking about like financial aid. So there is a large percentage of financial aid that's never distributed each year because not enough students apply for FAFSA. And then for scholarships, you know, there are scholarships that may not get distributed based on that they may not have an applicant for it. But specifically for scholarships too, those I would especially encourage you to connect with your guidance counselor at your high school or your college and career center or whatever equivalent that you have in your local community, because a lot of the time, some scholarships that you might find online might be a lot more competitive than the scholarships that might be available to you in your local community. Like there might be something from your local electricity company, like from the utilities, or from like a credit union or something. They might want you to open an account and then you get a scholarship for that. But you know, kind of picking up like a little award here and there, like you're going to be adding up the dollars, and you know, each little scholarship can help contribute toward the overall cost of college. And a lot of the time there's some interchangeability that you can take advantage of when it comes to, if you're going to be writing essays anyway for your college applications, a lot of scholarship applications also require an essay or personal statement or something like that. And you know, with some light editing, you can apply to a bunch of different scholarships without having to do too much extra work. And it's definitely, you know, worth applying for, you know, if there's, you know, less work to be done on your end. But I definitely would reach out to your, you know, kind of local community about those. Your parents' work might also offer scholarships. So I'm not sure if any students have parents who work for any of the national labs because this is SAGE, but if they do, maybe. It's like, I know that a lot of the national labs have great scholarships or even tuition-free benefits for students or reductions. So those are potentially other options. But yeah, Sylvia's right. There's scholarships for kind of like everything, not just based on your academics, but when you actually apply to schools too, a lot of the time the scholarships that they offer you is based on or are based on the academics, if it's coming from the institution. Some more popular, maybe large nonprofit private institutions might have large endowments that they can use to meet more of students' need as well, like like Sylvia said. But I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but definitely, seek out those local scholarships, like I said, and definitely, if you FAFSA, although it's a complex process, there's also resources in colleges, financial aid offices that you can turn to, or even nonprofits that do help students with the FAFSA process as well.
That was great. Thank you. Yeah, definitely save every essay you write. I recycle my essays like crazy. Like even scholarships I apply to now, I'm using essays I wrote my senior year of high school. It's great. So why rewrite it? So we're gonna move on to, we only have a little bit of time left. So for our application sections, I'm just gonna kind of ask the questions that we have from the chat. So really quickly, where was this? Okay, so how do you decide what to discuss for a school application?
So I'll tackle this one first. So for the UC applications, because it's, again, since so many of you are in California, for the UCs, they actually do a really interesting type of application. They have 8 mini questions and you have to choose 4. And so you can choose any 4. And what I like about the UC application is those 4 essays don't have to connect at all. It can be 4 totally random topics and it's okay. So you don't have to feel a pressure to make it all into one cohesive story. You can talk about your, love for Rainbow Loom and how you turned it into a business in one essay. And you can talk about being a STEM major and doing SAGE in another essay. And you can talk about, your family upbringing and being raised by grandma in another essay. So like, that's really easy, or not easy, but it's a little bit more simplistic to answer these short questions. With the Common App, it's a longer essay. It's a 650 word essay. And so there's 7 prompts there and you have to choose one of them. I guess I think the best advice I can give for that question is to not pigeonhole yourself in that question to only talking about one aspect of yourself, right? And I think that can be tricky because sometimes the questions will be like, well, tell us about a time that you changed your mind about something. And you could end up answering that question, but then not end up telling us all the other things about you that we'd like to know. And so that would be my advice for that is when you're answering the question, try to incorporate some of the things that you've done and your background and experience and not just talk theoretically about, well, this is how I would approach this situation, or this is why I change my mind about this particular thing. And the prompts sometimes can make you forget that at the end of the day, your goal is to talk about yourself and try to tell the person that's reading the essay why they should admit you into the program.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the advice that I would have is a lot like Sylvia's, as well as, and for that reason, because the prompt, it's easy to get misled maybe by the prompts, or leave out things that you really should be including. And for both the UC personal insight questions and the Common App, even if the Common App essay is longer, it's still only 650 words, which really isn't that much space when that's kind of your opportunity to really showcase why you should be admitted to whatever university you're applying for. So one thing I recommend too is share your essay, even if it's with a family member, someone who you trust, friend, but ideally maybe an English teacher, or maybe just another teacher who you trust, or your counselor at your school, because a lot of the time, these essays get very personal. So sometimes we make assumptions when we're writing about ourselves and our own experience that we might understand, but that someone who is not in our shoes may not quite understand. So what I always recommend is, yeah, sharing your essay, and always writing is a process. It should not be, the best writers do not write the final version of what you end up reading immediately. It goes through many drafts. And I know you probably hear this a lot from your teachers. And I know that a lot of the time we kind of might rush to do things at the last minute, but these essays have such a high impact on your future that you want to give yourself the time and credit and opportunity to really polish these essays and really make use of what little space they do give you. So I strongly recommend to have someone review it. For me personally too, when I've worked with students on helping them with their essays, I think that it's good sometimes to even set the essay aside and try to have a conversation about whatever story you're trying to tell or whatever idea you're trying to share, because sometimes you'll find that the ideas come out in a different way when you try to express them aloud. And then that might show that maybe you're not focusing on exactly what you wanted to in your essay, and maybe it needs to be revised to really emphasize whatever main idea that you're trying to have. And I know all of that might sound very like up in the air, but I definitely don't expect it to be perfect the first time you write it, and just be open to revision and getting input from others, because it is personal. And just remember that although you're writing about your own experience, there are things that other people might not know about your experience that you may need to explain more, or maybe not explain as much. It really, of course, depends on the story you're telling, but really make use of all that space that they give you, and everything that you write should contribute toward your response to whatever prompt that they're giving you.
I think the other thing I would add to what Josh is saying is definitely do a lot of that peer review and peer editing, but also make sure that you're spending your 650 words writing about yourself and not about somebody else. I think this is another thing that we often see is people will tell us a great story about their grandmother, and then kind of say, and that's why I'm the way I am today, or that's where I got my value from. And they end up spending so much of that time talking about the grandma, and it's like, oh wow, the grandma's amazing, but I'm not admitting the grandma to school. I want to admit the student, but the student didn't end up telling me much about themselves. And so I think that's a common mistake we see is you can talk about grandma and that's totally fine, but make sure that that is just a couple sentences at most. And then what we want to hear is the impact of that and what you did with that, more than the story of where you came from. I think there was a question about like what if what you did is like in this last senior year, in the last couple months, and is that bad? Absolutely not. Definitely, this is your senior year. This is when you're probably being that leader person or having that authority or credibility or have that expertise. Talk about it. So don't be afraid to talk about things that just happened to you a month ago, because this is the time when you probably have that maturity and responsibility and the ability to process what happened and talk about it in a really, reflective way.
Yeah, if I could emphasize any other part of that is the reflection piece, and because that's a lot of the areas for growth that I see in a lot of student essays is they might have gone through a traumatic experience or have just had something really extreme happen, or they want to talk about someone who's important in their life, but then they may not necessarily reflect on that experience at all. So in your essay, you want to make sure that you're taking opportunities to integrate, why what you're writing about is important, how you've learned from it, how it's demonstrated, or, how you've changed because of whatever has happened, or, how that will prepare you for, what you want to do in the future, rather than just being very matter of fact. I think I saw earlier somewhere in the writing that someone talked about it. Should it be a statement of facts? No, that's like the rest of the application. This is where you really get the opportunity to provide your own personal insight, which is why they're called personal insight questions on the UC application. So yeah, definitely. Yeah, and yeah, I don't think it's wrong either to choose something that's happened recently, as long as if you aren't still caught up in whatever's going on, in terms of like, if you don't feel ready to write about it, then maybe maybe that's not the right thing. But I do want to say, and I love that in Sylvia's bio, how you said that that everybody has a story to tell. Because one thing I always hear from students is, well, nothing interesting has happened in my life, like there's nothing I can write about. And that's another reason why I encourage you to work with someone who you trust, and maybe just start brainstorming however works best for you. But even just having conversations about the things that are important to you, or the important things that have happened in your life. Everyone does have something to share, and that can demonstrate, that you can put into your essay.
I think that's a great point that Josh made, that you may not think that what you've done is impressive, but you don't realize actually it is really impressive. Maybe you are on a soccer team at school and you're in soccer club. Maybe you've been an assistant coach and you've spent that hundreds of hours, on the soccer field, and you're like, well, sure, I did. Everybody did. And it's like, no, actually, not everybody does that. And so understand and recognize that if you've spent 3 hours every afternoon for a good, 5-6 months out of the year, that's a huge part of who you are, right? It's not just, oh yeah, well, I'm on the soccer team. No, actually, you've dedicated time and discipline and perseverance and skill building to be a soccer player, right? And so look at something that's helpful that I usually talk to students about is at the end of each year, and sometimes even twice a year if you're able to do it, sit down and just write down all the stuff that you've done. It doesn't have to be like a full-on fancy formal resume, but just do a list and say, okay, freshman year, I joined this club, this club, this club. I spent this many hours doing this, and do like a, day or week in the life of. And in 1 week, I, attended rehearsals for this school play that I was in. I, spent this number of hours doing peer tutoring. You start to realize, if you write it down, you step back, you're like, oh wait, I did a lot of stuff that you don't necessarily think about in the moment, because you feel like, oh, I need to say something big, or I need to say something impressive, without realizing that actually all the things that you've done in the past are really impressive.
That is definitely very true. Writing everything down makes you realize. I even do that now, because I'm like, maybe I'm not doing enough. You always are doing enough. All right. So I know we have a few more questions that we weren't able to get to, but for the sake of respecting everyone's time, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Julia.
Thank you, Dream. And thank you very much, Sylvia and Josh, for answering all these interesting questions the students wrote down. It's amazing how many questions, how many doubts you helped clarify. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing your insights and experience with us. It's great. A big round of applause, even if it's silent, from everyone. Thank you. We can keep on helping you with these questions. Write to Sage Camp and we can, or My Sage Journey, and we can answer your question. We can help answer your questions. I hope this Sage Live was useful. Thank you again, our speakers. Thank you for participating and writing your question, be engaged. Remember to follow us on social media. We will try to put a lot of content there as well. And as you know, the Sage Live is on the second Saturday of every month. And next time we're going to talk about paid internship. So what the timeline of internships, specific opportunities in all the national labs that run Sage. So tune up again the second Saturday of next month. And I hope I'll see you all soon. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.